Oh, I can see Sama. Good morning and a very warm welcome to the OER Business Live Middle East webinar on manufacturing, negotiating the new reality. This event is endorsed by Madaya, Oman Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and Oman Manufacturers Association. The strategic sponsors of the webinar are Octal, Sohar Aluminium, Misco, Jotun Paints Company, Arij Vegetable Oils and Derivatives, and Al Madina Logistics. I would like to express my gratitude to all our endorsing and strategic partners for their support. My name is Mayank Singh. I'm the Group Editor of OER BLME, and I will be moderating today's session. We have a stellar panel to discuss the implications of the pandemic on the manufacturing sector, and we are delighted to be joined by Engineer Saeed Al Rashidi, the CEO of Oman Manufacturers Association, Mr. Agnello Borim, Chief Operating Officer, Sohar Aluminium, Mr. Nasir Al Malki, who's the Director General of National Business Center, Madaya, and Ms. Sama Al Namani, Brand Manager, Jotun Paints Company. Welcome, gentlemen and lady. Before we proceed, I would like to highlight a few procedural points. We will be taking audience questions towards the end of today's webinar. So please do type in your questions in the panel below, which is the Q&A box with your name and designation. During the course of the discussion, we will be putting up a couple of polling questions for the audience. So please do participate with your response. And finally, today's webinar is also going live on YouTube, reaching a much larger audience. It's my pleasure to invite Mr. Agnello Borim to set today's agenda, to set the agenda for today's webinar, with a short presentation on how Sohar Aluminium has gone about negotiating the COVID-19 pandemic. Welcome, Mr. Agnello.
Thank you, Mr. Mayank, and thank you for the opportunity today to give you a quick presentation on Sohar Aluminium business. So if you move to the next slide. Sohar Aluminium, it's Oman's first greenfield aluminum smelter with an annual production of aluminum capacity of 390,000 tons of aluminum per year. So it's a facility that includes the smelter where we produce the aluminum. We have also a captive power plant which can supply the smelter, but also can supply the grid for Oman. And we have a dedicated port facility, which normally we receive all the main strategic raw materials that we use in the smelter. We also employ approximately 1,000 employees and about 700 contractors in our site. Of course, we also have indirect jobs created by the fact that we have the smelter here in the region. We are really proud to say that we have 76.4% of employees Omanis, and about 85% of those employees, they live here in North Al Batina Governorate. So it's a big Omanization, and we are also very much proud about the fact that we are really supporting the industry in Oman. The nature of our operation requires the plant running 24/7. It means in our electrolysis process, we need to keep the process running every single minute. We cannot stop. So that's why it's important to have really a stable process, and we depend on the energy that we also produce in our power plants. Our business is an important driver for long-term and sustainable value creation to Oman's economy. It's not only the fact that we have jobs, but our product is also used in many other applications within the country. And during this pandemic time, the challenge was to ensure safety of the workforce while sustaining stable operations here in our plant. Next one, please. So talking a little bit about our strategy to really fight against the COVID-19. Since the beginning, we formed an internal committee to really work to mitigate all the impact from COVID-19 in our plant. So we put some protection barriers, and normally following the WHO guidelines. And the first one was the social physical distancing. Then we need to keep people safe and working in some places that we cannot stay close together. And then we separate our offices. We install partitions in our offices to make sure that people will keep the distance. We also increase our focus on personal hygiene. Hand washing and sanitization always has been a mandate for our employees to make sure that they will keep the hygiene also in their workstation. Every time we will keep a safe workplace. We also apply in some places because we have more people working in a special place, and we used to do rotation in the past. So basically what we start to do, we start to assign clusters and making sure that our workforce management was always keeping those clusters. In case of infection, then it was much simple for us to manage and making sure that our employees always will be safe. We also limited the contact time. Many times you are with your colleague and working, but this can be a reason for also contact. According to WHO, this is also another aspect of the infection that needs to be controlled. So we apply this in all the departments in our operational areas as well. And finally, we implement since the beginning the personal protective equipment, which is the mask that we need to use all the time in our tasks, accessing the plant. At the same time, we implemented many other controls, including all the employees accessing our areas, our plant. They have their temperature measured. And we have a special system that recognizes the face, and the employee needs to be using the mask. And then we can also control the health of the employees. We also implemented a self-declaration for all employees to make sure that they will declare that they don't have any symptoms, and they can also work on site for employees and contractors. We also developed systems to verify our contractors in their camps. This was a requirement because the safety of our employees depends on also the safety and the health of the contractors. So we implemented this since the beginning, doing audits and making sure that our contractors were also following the guidelines from the Supreme Committee and the Minister of Health. So that's a summary, and for sure we are going to discuss in the panel, but many learning from this challenging time that we implemented, and we are still working to maintain, to sustain, because, as you know, we can have another wave, and we cannot relax anytime on what we are implementing and what we are following here at Sohar Aluminium. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Agnello. I think Mayank has gone offline for some reason. Anyway, I will take the proceedings further till I hand over back to Mayank as soon as he's back. So I think it's wonderful, Mr. Agnello, the sort of measures that Sohar Aluminium has taken to get things running and observe all the due precautions in times of the pandemic. Of course, very difficult and challenging times for all industry segments, but of course, the brunt of it is being faced by the manufacturing sector. So we can very well sort of empathize with the challenging times that you've been through, and it's wonderful that you had a well sort of aligned strategy to encounter that difficult situation. Now, moving on, I think the importance of the manufacturing sector in Oman can hardly be overstated. It contributes something like 9.6% of the Oman GDP, and that's what the contribution was in 2019. And for this year, we had an ambitious plan of taking that up to around 15%. And may I say that had the pandemic not happened, we should have been close to that goal. But unfortunately, because of the pandemic, till March 2020, according to the figures that have been released by the National Center for Statistics and Information, we are at a minus 12.5%, minus 12.1% sort of a degrowth. So yes, we can attribute that to the pandemic, but these are problems that we'll have to grapple with as the rest of the world is. So at this stage, I would like to bring in Mr. Saeed Al-Rashdi. He is the CEO of the Oman Manufacturers Association.
Sure, Atulya, you want me to take it forward from here?
Yes, please, Mike. I was just.
I'm so sorry. Apologies for that. We had a bit of an internet issue at our end. So, Mr. Saeed Al-Rashdi, you saw the context. I mean, Atulya has already given you the context. So, I mean, you're both, you represent the sector and you interact with the sector. So, what are your colleagues telling you about the challenges that the sector faces?
If we focus on the COVID-19's challenges, the biggest challenge was the closure of many markets where they are exporting to. And a lot of challenges also in relation to local operations. Many of the manufacturers were unable to operate for some time, partially or fully, and most of them are having difficulty exporting their products through the land. I mean, all of the borders around us has been closed for quite a while. This was really challenging because it came in an area or in a time where they were in a deepest need to get back the business and get things done, get this working again. These challenges are slowly easing off. The operations are now back in almost all the manufacturers. Everybody is working at full capacity now. The markets are still a challenge, but it's opening up slowly. The borders to Saudi Arabia was open a few days ago, and things are getting back to normal slowly. One good thing happened because of the pandemic is the opening of our sea lines. The marine business, I mean, the transportation through the sea has improved a lot in the last few months due to the pandemic, because the manufacturers have had to become a bit more creative about delivering and receiving the raw materials So the dependency on neighboring countries has been reduced, and we are now more efficient in getting things direct.
So at least that is a silver lining to the whole thing. And I would like to get an industry perspective from Ms. Sama. So how are you how have you gone about combating the whole situation at Jodhpur?
I would like to start off with Jotun is very happy with the way the situation was handled by the Supreme Committee. There were some challenges or limitations faced, of course, specifically from an operational perspective. First one being our dealer shops being closed. This led to a drop in sales and operations being affected. However, we believe this was the best interest of the safety of the people and our employees. Another challenge is that we have shop floor employees that live outside of Muscat in areas like Fenja and Samal, etc. And due to lockdown, they couldn't come to the office. And shop floor employees are key in the manufacturing sector. So when restrictions were made on movements between governments and employees, it put a little hold in terms of our operations. However, Jotun Oman has a fair amount of employees that are in Muscat itself, and this challenge was overcome by extending working hours. And then we also faced another challenge when our cleaning outsourced company were under quarantine and they were not able to come to work. This was overcome by some employees helping to keep the site clean. There's a lot of waste segregation that took place, and also Jotun hired a separate accommodation to keep the outsourced cleaning companies separate. So there were some challenges we faced specifically in operational perspective, but thankfully we've managed to overcome them.
Okay. Now, you talked about a dealer network, and you say that even our employees could not come back to work. And now, are they back to normal? Are you getting 100% of your labor force back, or your dealerships open right now?
Yes.
Okay, that's heartening to hear. And I'd like to bring in Mr. Nasir here. I mean, Madaya is one of the key drivers of Oman's manufacturing sector. I mean, you have 7 industrial cities in Sur, Sohar, Raisut, Nizwa, Buremi, Rusail, Samel, and then you have Qom and Al Mazyona Free Trade Zone. So what are the tenants telling you about the challenges that they are facing, and how are you helping them? Sir, you're on mute, sir. If you can unmute yourself.
Hi, hello to everybody. In fact, Madaya was from the beginning trying to address and minimize the risk associated with the pandemic. The most urgent one was health and safety in terms of doing some precautions, trainings, and also visits to the companies. So we started by doubling our HSE team. These are full-time employees who were tackling the problems face-to-face in the field. Madaya contributed to minimize the risk and trying to reduce the effects on the industry in 2 ways. One is in the health and safety regulations and enforcement, and the other one also in the financial aspects. From the financial aspects, we stopped asking, for example, for rent collections in Q2. Also, we did some exemptions from penalties in different areas, except those regarding the health and safety, regarding the how to deal with the pandemic. So we had more than 2,300 visits to the companies and we penalized 42 companies who were not that strict with the pandemic. Also, we eased the financial aspects from like stopping any interest on late payment. We didn't ask people to pay rent until also end of 2020. We rescheduled a lot of pending payments prior 2020, so it will not put pressures on the manufacturing. Also, from the health and safety perspective, we created an emergency room where we work 24/7. And we also send all of these contact details to this emergency room. Even we have a WhatsApp number and also a landline number. Okay. So Madaya did a lot of things in this perspective.
Sure. Just two things from what you said. It's great that you've done a great amount of supervisory work in terms of HSC, and you've also deferred your payments. But have you reduced tenants, the rent that you're charging from tenants, one? Secondly, you're also the Director General of NBC, which is basically an incubator for SMEs. How are you helping SMEs in particular? Because a lot of manufacturing companies are small and medium enterprises.
From the reduction, yes, we eliminate like 3 months payment. Okay. And we were ready to just extend any rescheduling after 2020. So we got ahead also financially as Madaya, because also we have to do some development. We have to serve our community in a better way, but we are committed to support all of these companies. The good thing also, we didn't file a single bankruptcy or closure in the manufacturing sector within Madaya. No company was like, let us say, severely affected so that it go to closure. And this is a good thing. Manufacturing industry was working to some extent. And regarding national business centers, it is unexpected, happily to say that our company's income in average increased by 35% in Q2. Yes, some companies were affected directly, but some of them, they did very well because they are into the demand of pandemic requirements like medicals and medical supplies, detergents and cleaning and all of these areas. They recorded 440,000 income in Q2, and these are only companies under incubations.
Sure, sir. That's wonderful. Sama, Mr. Said, you operate out of Madaya. I mean, what Madaya has done, is this enough, or you want more from them?
No, actually, I would like to mention that we have benefited a lot from Madaya, and I think it has been a good coordination with their organization and ours. Like he mentioned, there was a lot of site visits that took place to ensure that regulations were being followed. And this was good also because it guarantees whether sites are following Supreme Committee decisions as well. And they did. I know that Madaya circulated videos on on measures to take during the pandemic, and they documented the best practices. And Jotun did participate in this video, and visual tools are way better, in my opinion, than written rules and regulations.
If you're happy as a tenant, that's enough, I guess. That's what I wanted to say. A quick word, Mr. Said, anything that you're hearing in terms of Madaya, is enough being done, or there needs to be more that needs to be done?
I can say a lot of things when Mr. Nasser is not around.
No, you can.
I'm just kidding. They did a fantastic job. And Madaya was one of One of the entities that were mostly praised. You have to know that they are not legally binded to offer whatever they have offered. They were not legally binded to waive rents and to support their tenants as they were. But considering that they are representing the government side too, this was a fantastic job. And I think Madaya was one of the areas where we feel very happy that we got the support that we are needed.
That's really
obviously, there is plenty even to do more, but we can't say more than.
I can understand. I can know it's great work. I want to come back to Mr. Agnello. What you have a huge production capacity. Have you gone back to 100% production right now?
Well, in fact, we didn't reduce our production capacity. We were able to sustain 100%. Even we have been achieving very good performance indicators in our process. Of course, because of a global pandemic, we also saw a decline in the commodity price of our product, which is aluminum, in the world. So this also had an impact on our business. But now we can see that the world is coming back. Operations and consumption is returning. Even in China, we can see a big consumption happening. And this is something that is also helping now the price of the aluminum. And what we saw also during the pandemic time, of course, many manufacturing industry, they reduce production, but some industry which requires aluminum, like packing, they produce much more for food or for medical products. So this was also a positive outcome. But of course, we want to see the world coming back because consumption of aluminum can be much higher in the world.
So there are opportunities. Even in this pandemic, I guess there are certain sectors like Madaya has gone up. They're saying that SMEs really did a lot of good work and they're actually their revenues went up. You're saying aluminum production is up or consumption is up at least. And a good point that you made saying that because of the logistical issues, that brings us to the second big topic of discussion today, which is exports. Now, given the size of Oman's market, the manufacturing sector is to a large extent dependent on exports. But given the challenges because of the pandemic, actually non-oil exports fell by a minus 27.6%. Minus 27.6% fall year on year till March 2020, according to NCSI figures. So how will this fall in exports impact the sector and what can be done about it, Mr. Agnello?
Well, in our business, we supply some downstream customers, which they were affected by. But as I said, we didn't have many issues on transportation or exports because we have a commodity and we export to different countries. So in fact, in our case, was not a big impact. Of course, we had a lot of concerns in the beginning because of importing of strategic raw materials, even knowing what was happening in other countries. But we did a good approach to all the suppliers, and we didn't have major issues or disruptions in the supply chain that is required to our business.
Sure. But Ms. Samad, you in your industry, people are hesitant to get people to paint their houses now. Has that been a direct challenge that you're facing? And exports also, I mean.
So Jyotin Oman exports products to countries such as Qatar, UAE, and Saudi Arabia. And during lockdown and the closing of governance, we struggled to move goods to the Sohar port for the first few days. However, the ministry identified the gap, and within a couple of days, the government opened for commercial vehicles only. We still face challenges due to evening curfew, roadblock limitations for heavy trucks. So we had a very narrow window to ship our goods. And the same was applicable for incoming raw materials from UAE and other companies. However, I'd like to add that mainly due to good planning, management crisis meeting being held was very beneficial in terms of risk assessment and execution. Now, the month of April was a bit slow. Sales were down. However, like I mentioned, due to good planning, alignment, and coordination with suppliers, we managed to implement in a very positive way, and we managed to pick up and recover. And you can see that by the month of July, our sales were better. We're picking up.
Sure.
Also, another thing that I would like to add, I think what worked well for us is that having people locked in their homes made them realize that I think they should be investing a lot of time and energy into beautifying their homes. So yes, yes.
You can't do marketing pitch on this webinar. Yeah. Sure. No, I point taken. No, but that's very heartening to hear. Okay, let's take the first polling question or related to it. Can we have the first polling question, please, for the audience? Well, yeah, the production team, can you please put out the first question? Yeah. So the question is enough being done to promote the export of manufacturing products from Oman? Is enough being done to promote the export of manufacturing products in Oman? So if you could possibly vote on this, I think the numbers are moving around and it seems interesting. Okay, sure. Okay, if you can just give us 10 more seconds. Okay, people are not, I think, sure. So this is the results. So 62% say no. I mean, around the same thing. I think it's a 60, 35, 65, 35 divide. So 36% say yes and 64% say no. Now, till now, ITRA was tasked with promoting Omani exports, and now it's become a part of the Ministry of Trade, Investment and Investment Promotion under His Excellency Kaisal Yusuf. In addition, there are also special economic zones in Dukum, Salalah, Sohar. But despite these, Omani exports are not growing the way they should. And I want to come to Mr. Said. I think you have very strong feelings on this topic and you have some very strong views. How can Omani exports be promoted better? And then Mr. Nasir after that.
Well, the now, since Corona challenges are going down, and since the companies are able to manufacture and produce as much as they used to before, the challenges go back to the topics that we were discussing pre-Corona. So we have recently listened a list to His Excellency Kaisal Yusuf. We are very excited because he was the one who was with us in the Chamber of Commerce, defending the rights and standing with the manufacturers and trade businessmen. And now he is the one who is handling the ministry. So we are very excited. I think his point of views will be very compassionate with what we are, and he will be very understanding to what we are looking for. We have sent him around 15 points. The main focus was how can the government, considering their current economic standing, how can the government support the sector? Usually, historically, most of the support will cost money. If you want to reduce the electricity tariff, you have to spend some money. If you want to reduce any of the fees or taxation, you will have to give up some money. So there are some innovative ideas where the government can actually support the manufacturers without really having to spend actual cash. There are many ways of easing business, many ways of easing whether it's easing the entrance of investors from outside or easing the movement of products. One major point that the government can do is that the focus on ICV. At the moment, the talk about ICV is very, I mean, the topic is talked about in almost every meeting, but in reality, manufacturers do not get enough support locally. They don't get that enough priority. The local manufacturers contribute to the society, contribute to the government's income through taxation, contributes to the GDP of the country. But at the moment, if a manufacturer fights into a tender with imported items, there isn't much preference given. We have, along with His Excellency Kaisal Yusuf, he was handling, he was preparing a very good report that analyzes the situation. The biggest change we are hoping to see is that there will be item by item preference by 10% to Omani product. If they do that, we think that it'll make a huge difference. At the moment, tenders are every tender is being asked to give 10% to the Omani market. Like, imagine if somebody is tasked with building, constructing a building, there is automatically more than 10% going to the local market anyway. So this has been rendered ineffective. The condition of 10% is already being fulfilled without the manufacturer, without the local tenderer doing anything about it. But if we do a 10% preference to the local product, then we are giving every manufacturer in Oman an opportunity to compete in a better way.
Sure. So what does it mean when you're saying 10%? I mean, how would that help exports? You get
No, sorry. I was in this case, I was talking about the local consumption and specifically government tenders. For the exports, we had OREX, which was as a committee organizing a lot of exhibitions outside, and it was a very successful experience. Almost all the manufacturers who have been participating in these exhibitions has been very happy because they were getting orders from outside. The biggest thing that the government can do through ISRA, and I've discussed this with ISRA, and now since ISRA is coming back to the ministry, is to have a proper database of manufacturers in Oman. At the moment, there is no single database for manufacturers in the country. If somebody from outside wants to buy an item in Oman, he wouldn't have any idea where to look for. So ISRA, being ISRA, and even if it was being part of the ministry now, should have that database, should have a database of all manufacturers and make it easy for people. One more thing we suggested was to have some kind of an online exhibition that is continuous throughout the year. So manufacturers wouldn't just see a list of items or list of manufacturers. I mean, when a visitor comes from outside, he should be able to see the products, have a way of communicating with the manufacturer. That is not a very hard to do, technically speaking, but the hardest thing is to get accurate information of the manufacturers and what products they're producing.
No, point taken. Great suggestions. One, to have a list of products, Omani products. Secondly, to have a digital exhibition. Mr. Nasser, your thoughts on this, on promoting Omani products?
Yes, Saeed, he said it all, let us say. I want to add that Madaya took advantage, or let us say, took the initiatives from the beginning. And we started campaigns in Africa mainly, and we were very successful. We had a lot of deals for those who came with us. This is an annual event. We hold it every year, and we saw a lot of demands for the Omani products. We want to see more contributions of Omani products in international exhibitions, not only for the Omani products itself, because these contributions can create also interlinks between different industries and create new opportunities. I totally agree with the online database, which we started something now, but we are not yet ready to say anything about it. So let us say we hope we can do something in future.
Sure. Now, we spoke about exports, but actually it's not just exports, and I want Mr. Agnello and Ms. Sama to come in. And not just as from your company perspective, but not only are you facing threats in exports, but actually some of the large players are coming and eating into the market in Oman also. I mean, actually, there have been dumping charges in steel and cement. Oman actually enacted an anti-dumping law in March against cement producers who were dumping products from the region into Oman. And then there's a mismatch in scales. I mean, look at the size of companies in the region, and manufacturing companies in Oman are much smaller. So, I mean, in terms of price, in terms of effectiveness, they have an advantage. Now, how can these be combated? Mr. Agnello first.
Well, I think in this case, we are not seeing a big impact, as I mentioned before. Of course, our customers, which depends on export, they are seeing much closer the impact on tax, which some countries like US, they are applying. So this is a concern, but it's not really impacting on our business today.
Sure. Okay.
Which is for sure is an issue for the country. I think for sure manufacturing needs to have a clear regulation to make sure that we will not have this kind of issues affecting our supply chain. I think it's really important to have a clear regulation and support the smaller manufacturing companies.
Sure. Sama, any
Yes,
thoughts?
I would have to agree with everything Mr. Agnello said, that impact is not very heavy in terms of import in our business today. However, if you have clear regulations, support, everything, it won't have a very negative impact.
Sure.
Yeah.
Come to the government. I mean, because, in what ways can the government help the sector? I mean, because I'm sure, and I want to come to Mr. Saeed. I mean, as Oman Manufacturers Association, what is your wish list, or at least a couple of things that you want the government to do right now?
Well, I don't think I can list the items that can be done, because as I told you, there are more than 15 to 20 points that we've been discussing.
Yeah.
But I think that one of the largest profiles we're handling is what I mentioned initially about the ICV. If the government decides to really give a preference to the Omani products locally, then it will make a huge impact, because in Oman, the government is one of the biggest spender, one of the biggest purchasing entities. The second thing is files like, for example, CRT. The electricity tariffs are now cost reflective. Since that started, the electricity cost has increased heavily, and there are some manufacturers. I know Sohar Aluminium are members with us, but they have their own power generation, so they are not suffering from this. But there are many manufacturers who operate 24/7 and cannot go down, cannot stop, because stopping will cost them a lot of money, because they have to reheat the ovens and the furnaces. These kind of businesses are suffering a lot because of the electricity tariffs, and this is something that we are now discussing with the government and looking for ways of how to mitigate and how to work it out. There is a proposal being sent by the Ministry of Commerce that will be a KPI-based cost of tariff that will give benefit to companies that adhere to Omanization, that purchase from local market their raw materials as much as is possible. It will reward them with better rates. There are many creative solutions which you can implement that doesn't cost the government that much money, but at the same time will have an impact in the local market.
Let me challenge you on both the points. Now, this is not a new thought saying that, ICV and local companies should be given preference. So it's been around for a while. Why is this not happening? Secondly, on electricity tariffs, this is not sustainable from a fiscal deficit point of view. You cannot have electricity being subsidized forever, because that's a huge bill for the country. Now, you think that these are resolvable issues, and what can be done to address them? Because you have multiple interests at work here.
ICV is not being implemented the way that we want it, because of Oman have entered multiple external agreements with GCC and with other countries, which doesn't allow them to favor the local product. But what's happening in reality is that many of these countries are actually doing it. So now it's a time to decide whether we really want to commit ourselves to an extent where we are damaging our own products and we are allowing people to import to us. I think the minister knows this case very well, and I think I am really hopeful that he will make a big decision in this regard. As of the CRT, we are not saying that the government should subsidize directly to the manufacturers, but what we are saying is that imagine a manufacturer who is working 24/7 the whole year. Why should that manufacturer be the one who is paying the difference in the bill in the summer when the electricity is in a high demand? That manufacturer has been using electricity consistently for 24/7 throughout the year. The actual consumers who make a difference during the summer is individuals. We're talking about homeowners here. And my point is why the manufacturers, the one who are contributing to the GDP, are the one who is bearing all the cost of the CRT. Why shouldn't the cost be split to others? And what I'm also saying is that there are smart ways. We are not asking them to subsidize for everybody, but there are specific producers whom, as a business, will suffer a lot because of this. So maybe some areas can be dealt with.
Yeah, probably that's it. Mr. Agnello, your thoughts? Anything that you wish from the government or the government could help you out with?
Well, right now we are facing some challenges because the nature of this pandemic also close international borders. So we depend on some experts to perform some projects that we need to perform here, and also some of overhauls, maintenance. We hope that, of course, following all the health measures, that the government is going to open the border, because then we can do the projects and we can keep our improvements. And I'm sure that the government is really taking all the positive decisions to make sure that the country is going to be protected and the people will be protected. But the economy also needs to move, and to move the economy, we need to also be open to the world.
Sure. Have you had this conversation with the government? Have you approached this whole topic with them?
Yeah, we have been approaching the officials to make sure that we can have some exemptions and proceed with this type of need that we have in our business.
Okay, now I want to bring in Mr. Nasir and Ms. Sama here. I mean, the sector is also a large employer. In 2019, it employed over 32,000 Omanis. So the government needs to support it not just from an economics point of view or from a diversification point of view, but also from an employment point of view. So what can the government do in that regard? Yeah, Mr. Nasir? How can the government support the manufacturing sector, because it's a large employer also, and you want more young Omanis to get employed in the sector? Is it ICV is the way to go forward? What can be done?
ICV is one way. The other thing also Saeed mentioned is in terms of easing the CRT. In fact, Madaya brought investors in the solar energy, and they were ready to implement solar plants to provide electricity with less than the current cost, and it will be fixed for 20 to 30 years. But we had problems with the authorities because the grid is owned by other private companies. So we were also looking into the CRT problems just to support these companies. The other thing also, we introduced Madaya Academy to train the Omani employees and to elevate their skills and trainings, and it was free of charge given to the companies, and we started that. But then the NTF came and they started saying, okay, no, everything has to go to the NTF. So now with the restructurings, I think there are a lot of opportunities to provide to the industry, and things, I hope it will be much more easier in futures.
Sure. Ms. Sama, I mean, any thoughts on what the government can do?
Yes, I would like to continue to add on to what Mr. Nasser said. It is very beneficial and important to provide training and to strengthen the skills of the youth here in Oman, because they have a lot of capability to build the industrial sector by introducing new innovations. Probably they're very well educated, so providing training programs, like for example Jotun has the same thing, where we would take in students and the youth of Oman and train them in different departments as well too, so that they can build new skill sets, as well as we have a graduate program here. And I think we should emphasize more on the importance of this, to build them up so that they grow with us as well. And these graduate programs are very emphasize a lot on intensive training and education as well. So yes, I think
that's an important point. I mean, because the industry has been talking about a skill gap, and what Madaya is doing and what Jotun and I'm sure the other companies also doing will help. Just a quick word on the availability of finance. Is that a challenge right now in this market? Are banks lending to the sector, or are companies struggling for money? Mr. Saeed, any thoughts on that?
Well, obviously, it's not as easy as before now. Getting
Sure.
money from the banks is getting harder and harder. This is a bit of an irony. The banks now have more money in cash to loan, but they are now scared to give it to anybody. So now if you can prove that you are feasible and if you are prove that you are able to deliver back, you will be getting cash easier than before. But that's the thing. The risk department now has the final say.
Okay. Mr. Admilo, are you finding it difficult for project capital or basically running capital to get procured running capital from the banks now?
Yeah, as mentioned by Mr. Said, it's harder and harder now to get money, and the interest is going to be high. We have seen also some increase on our insurance cost, and it's due to the difficulties that we have in the market. So I believe if we have a good business case, I'm sure that we can attract investment. But we need to do our homework as well.
Is this like an artificial fear, like banks are sitting on a lot of cash, but they're not lending? So, the money doesn't flow in the system. So that's important. And I want Mr. Nasir to come in because, this affects SMEs really badly because, if they don't have the money, they can't keep running. They have to shut down their shop. How can that be addressed?
In fact, yes, it affects the SMEs. The irony that also some SMEs, they got, for example, some fund for a specific project. And if they want to have another contract or like 2 or 3 contracts, the bank is not giving them money. And they ask for always collateral, like a real estate. If this small SMEs is a real estate agent, he will not be doing SME's project,
Sure.
And this is difficulties that we are facing now with the banks. Unfortunately, also the Rafid Fund has stopped for some times now. I hope we can go around with some solutions. So we offered like some guarantees from the let us say, from the providers where payment will go to the bank directly instead of going to the owner. So this money will be issued by the bank by a signature, for example, from the business owners, the service receivers, instead of from the business owner himself. So, but still, we have some difficulties.
No, I understand. Absolutely, I understand. That's a huge challenge. We're also hearing about it from industry leaders. Let's take the second polling question, please. Second polling question is related to Industry 4.0. Are manufacturing companies in Oman prepared for the fourth industrial revolution? Just to sum it up, basically, fourth industrial revolution means using smart technology to improve your traditional manufacturing practices. So you were operating, but now there's IoT, there is a lot of digitization. So you use them to improve your manufacturing processes. Sure, if you can just 10 more seconds, I guess we will have the results. But it seems most people think that companies in Oman are not really prepared for it. So I guess, can we freeze the results, please? Yeah. So 68 versus 32%. 68% think we are not prepared. Oman is not prepared. And I guess, and 32% said we are. So Mr. Admilo, your thoughts on this?
Well, it's not a surprise that the poll is showing that Oman is not ready. But I believe that, it's a question of time to materialize the investments in automation, in robotics, in the digital technology, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence. There are many, many good projects, and we have examples here in our plant that we are applying. Of course, we need to have a business case. It needs to make sense for our business. But we are improving efficiencies. We are improving our safety. We are also trying to improve productivity and make our business sustainable. So I think, as I said, it's a way with no return. We need to be prepared, and we need to invest in automation, in digital technology.
Sure. A company like Sohar Aluminium may have the deep pockets to do so, but will the pandemic, in a way, make it that much more unlikely that this adoption will happen in the short period of time? Because there's no business case now to invest that kind of money in automation. This will slow down the whole adoption of Industry 4.0.
We do have projects ongoing, and during the pandemic, of course, we start to develop many other projects that you can work from home, you can work from a distance remotely, which is beneficial for our business, and also is more productive. So there are many examples that we didn't stop. We are also bringing new technology and new equipment that can give us fast response and much reliable, accurate results. So this is possible, and we are moving on digital technology.
Ms. Sama, Jotun, big multinational company. Do you see this happening within that, and that's the message from the parent company?
I do see this happening, especially because we have certain standards that we have to comply with, high standards, and we always look towards innovation. And since the pandemic, actually, there's been a huge transition to utilizing digital tools already. We were forced to. Due to limitations and restrictions of not having physical contact and complying with social distancing rules, this has forced us to move towards digital communication, digital tools, as well as making sure work is done and in a digital manner. And actually, results have shown that this has been very effective, and it's easy to pick up now. Even though things are coming back to normal, you can still see that people have gotten used to these digital practices. Yeah.
Sure. So, point taken, Mr. Nasser. Do you see this happening in Madaya and amongst your tenants at NBC? The adoption of digitalization, Internet of Things, and everything led to technology. I mean, related to technology.
Yes. In fact, I don't think this is like a luxury that I guess we need to take it. It has to be justified from a business cases, financial wise. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense that we use it. So once we have these business cases, then the investors will be able to do much more in this area. This is one thing. The other thing, the government has to be prepared. The infrastructures, the rules, the regulations, all of this has to be there. There are some work on this. From the private sector perspective, we have one company start assembling IoT sensors now in Rusail. This is also one of the companies that we invested in as Madaya. We brought the technology from Europe, and now we have it here. They have a project to convert all smart meters, all meters, water meters in Muscat to be smart meters based on IoT, and they have the network also with Ooredoo. This is happening, but again, it has to have some business uses. It has to be justified financially. Then the investors can do something in that.
Sure. Mr. Said, just bringing you here, you heard both the points of view. One is everyone agrees that this is the way forward. There's no denying that. But yeah, a lot of people, Mr. Agnello, Mr. Nasser, spoke about the business case. Is there a business case for this? And is this going to happen in Oman? And in what kind of time frame?
As a person who comes from a technology study and core career, I get very excited when I see newer technologies being implemented in something that we are working on now. But I wish I was as optimistic as the others. I don't think that we have the ability to become an innovation leader in the coming future for one main reason. we don't have enough research in Oman. The new technology always comes from research. And the current way of study, the current universities, the current academic style of education here is more of a consumer of technology rather than producer. I think it's going to take projects like what Mr. Nasser mentioned, producing something, assembling a technological advancement can be done easily because you are bringing technology from outside. But to become an actual producer of something interesting, some new technology, really depends on how much research you have in the country, how much the country mindset-wise, investment-wise are looking at research. Maybe with the new merger of the research and the Ministry of Higher Education, with the introduction of multiple new universities, maybe we'll be seeing better results in the future. We are very hopeful, but at the current state, 4IR is something that we talk about in every meeting, but I don't think we'll be seeing some real solutions anytime soon.
I think, but that's a big focus area. Great that you touched on innovation and skilling and education. That's a big focus area, and I'm sure this will happen. It's time to take audience questions, and I know Atulya, you've been sitting very quietly there. I mean, any thoughts? Has been a fascinating discussion. I'd like to bring back Mr. Atulya Sharma, who's the CEO of UMS. Any thoughts on the discussion? Any questions?
I think it's been very insightful hearing from both the practitioners and the actual policy makers, if I may call them that. Yes, one question that immediately comes to mind is about, in spite of a lot of workforce being employed in the manufacturing sector, the Omanization rates are dismally low. I know we've touched upon, what needs to be done in terms of, upskilling the Omani workforce. A lot of initiatives have been taken by Madaya and other private sector employers in their own personal capacity. But as a country, what exactly needs to be done so that we can really, motivate people to join the technical workforce and take pride in that, and not just leave it to, the expatriates who come from certain clusters who sort of occupy these roles more than anybody else. So that's an immediate question that comes to mind.
Yeah, please.
So I think Mr. Nasser or Mr. Said, and then maybe some words from the private sector operators, Mr. Agnello and Ms. Sama.
We are in a partnership with Madaya and Ministry of Commerce. Have been working in an Omanization team for the sector for the last 1.5 years approximately. It has been very successful. We have managed to increase the number of people being hired in the sector, but in reality, the challenges are deep. First of all, to hire Omanis in a very low-skilled job will mean an increase in your cost, and your competitive advantage will be lost. I mean, we are competing with countries from the East that have a much lower labor cost, and some markets or some kind of businesses, like for example, we have Sohar Aluminium with us here. They are advanced and they are technological and they are able to produce even with a good high-paid employees. So that's why you see that their Omanization rate is quite good, and they're doing a fantastic job there. But there are some very low producers who can't at all afford to hire Omanis at all the levels. So what we have been doing in the team, along with Madaya and the ministry, is that we have decided to take the manufacturers case by case. We have been visiting them and to understand why what kind of challenges. We had the ability of forcing, for even shutting down the manufacturer if needs so. So we had the power, but we decided to try to listen to them, and we gave them an annual plan to Omanize and so that they can transit into it easily. We have seen cases where Omanization has been forced into manufacturers until the collapse point. If you force a factory to hire Omanis more than they can afford, at some time they will break and they will shut down. So we really don't want to reach there. We want to increase the number to a reasonable extent.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, anyone else wants to touch upon this Omanization and how that can be increased?
I agree with Mr. Said. I don't think we need to enforce. It's not going to be the solution. I think we need to work on education. We want to train and prepare our workforce, and this requires times and effort. And I think it's important to have a strategy and really work hard to develop the employees. And I don't think it's just for the low level jobs, but also for the medium high level. We need to prepare. We need to make sure that we are going to have a good system in place to develop our employees and in the country in the future.
Sure. Okay, there's a lot of questions, but I'll just take a few as we're running out of time. And there's a question from Mr. Nasir Al Malki. Someone has said that thank you for the informative seminar. Do you think we will be able to build using solar panels and also go off grid in the near future? Saying that we can move from conventional energy to solar energy in the future.
I believe it depends on the regulatory. Madaya, with its with its companies and with its let's say relations internationally, we are ready even to bring the solar energy. We are ready to implement them, but we still have some issues with the current regulations and procedures. So I hope we can solve this in the very future, let us say within a year at least.
Sure. So probably it will happen.
We hope.
Sure. There's a question.
I would like to add a small point here. The Oman has or able to produce much more power than it needs. At the moment, in the normal days, I'm not talking about the summer, we consume maybe 30 to 40% of our capacity. So Oman has a lot of capacity and there is a lot of power on the grid. To bring in solar solutions, as Mr. Nasser said, we'll have some resistance because we are already capable of producing enough power. We only have challenges in the peak of the summer in the 4 hours of the afternoon time. That is the only time where we actually reach towards the our capacity. And because Oman has a very extreme weather in the summer and a lot of cooling is required, the consumption difference between the normal months and the summer is quite high. And I think smart solutions like storage of power rather than production of power would probably make more sense, because we need to store power in the night time and use it in the afternoon time so that we level up the consumption. This means that we will never have to produce more power than what we are doing now for the coming years.
Sure. Or probably the GCC grid would be another way to go about it. There's a question from Ali Al Shamsi. What needs to be done to catch up with in IR in basically for 4.0 practices, Industrial Revolution 4.0, and how can the employment plans be managed while motivating Industrial Revolution 4.0? So he's saying that if you bring in more digitalization, it may have an effect on organization or employment generation. So one, how can we improve these practices without affecting the labor market? Yeah, anyone who wants to go for it? Anyone who wants to answer this?
I already gave something here.
Yeah, please.
Yes, I go. Go ahead.
I just mentioned about the research, so I think that is a very good point to start with. And Mr. Nasser can tell.
Sure. Mr. Nasser, you wanted to add something?
People said the same thing when the computers came.
Sure.
They were afraid that there will be no more jobs. No, jobs will be there. New jobs will be even much more payment for those new jobs in data analytics, AI. A lot of new opportunities will be open. This does not mean that this is the end. No, the future is always bringing new jobs, new requirements, and new challenges.
Sure. There's a question from Satya Bodha. He's the head of corporate strategy, MISCO, and he says that Supreme Committee really did a great job in managing this pandemic, especially for the manufacturing sector. But for survival and continuity of business, is there anything special help that the government can do, like in reduction of power, water tariffs, or in raising funds for working capital and special projects? So basically, he's saying that what else can the government do apart from the way they manage it in terms of electricity tariffs, power tariff reduction in those, or helping in raise funds for capital and special projects? We have touched upon this, but yeah, if you can kindly throw some light on these, please. Anyone? Mr. Agnello, what else can be done in these things? Raising capital and reducing tariff or fee.
Well, it's difficult to talk about what the government can do because they just did a big reorganization, and we have a lot of hope in the new government that has been formed.
Sure.
Of course, all the support from the government it will help, but we cannot just keep subsidizing the business. We need to make sure that the business will be also self-sufficient in terms of performance, in terms of results and profitability. I believe that's what the government now is going to start doing, and for sure starting with the government itself, because there are many aspects that today the investments in infrastructure and maybe in things that is not a high priority for the moment needs to be redirected to the focus on what is needed for the country.
I mean, this is the last question that I'm taking, though, because we are running short of time. What initiatives are in place to woo foreign investors to set up manufacturing facilities in Oman? How do you woo foreign investors or FDI into the country? Sama, you have any thoughts on that? You've been sitting very quietly for a while now. Yeah. Any thoughts on it? Because Jotun is a multinational company that is invested in Oman. So how can we do more of these in Oman?
I would say first, earlier Mr. Saeed mentioned a valid point where having more, the idea of the exhibition, this can gain more exposure. Once yes, having the exposure and awareness could lead to the potential of grabbing investors into the country, yes. And then everything else follows after, such as the research, market research, forecasting, and seeing if it will actually work or not. But yes, research is important and awareness too.
Mr. Said, how do we make Oman more attractive to foreign direct investment, particularly in manufacturing sector?
Having somebody from Madaya in here makes a big difference.
Yeah, I'm going to report to him.
They are the most capable of people to invite others. They have the land and they have the ability of exempting people through the government of many things. I think the government now will. I mean, we have been saying this for a long time, but we are going to attract people now. I think there is a big change that's going to happen now. Omanization rules should be eased off a little bit or made in a smarter way. The reduction or the support in tariff, for example, in electricity and water, should be also affiliated with a KPI that takes care of local benefits for the local society. And I think Mr. Nasser might add.
Yeah, Mr. Nasser, Madaya needs to attract more investments.
Madaya have revisited the rules and regulations that enable them to provide more incentives. Now we can give sanctions up to 99 years for investors. We can sell even properties. We can sell lands from that under Madaya. We are more flexible into negotiating for the having a developer. We can even allocate one estate, a new brand estate with 10 million square meters for a new developer. So we have a lot of initiatives here to just make Oman more attractive to the investors, where we have almost every options that other people provide and more yet.
Okay, sure. So I guess that should be music to the ears of people who are looking at investing in Oman. We completely run short of time, so we just go with the closing remarks. And I'd like to start with Ms. Sama. There's a new council of ministers in place, new government in place in a way. Is there any one particular piece of advice, recommendation, or wish list that you want to present to them, or anything else? Any other takeaway from today's webinar that you want to bring to the table?
I think most important thing is to acknowledge the good job the government has done so far, and to thank them. And I would suggest to keep up the frequent communication with between them and us and the organizations, because this will lead to alignment, coordination, and that leads to effective results in the end.
Sure. Well said. Mr. Agnello?
Yeah, as mentioned before, I think clear regulations, rules and regulations always is going to help the industry. And I think that's an important role from the government. That's what I would like to make sure that it's clear, and then we can adopt.
Sure. Mr. Said?
Well, the excitement that the new ministers are coming with, I hope that it sustains for a long time. Because I know when someone is just taking care of an office, they will do their best, and I know that there'll be a good difference now. One more thing is that many of those ministers were our colleagues at some time and were from our generation, so we are very happy because our generation is taking over.
Yes.
Okay, the last word to the government, Mr. Nasir Al-Maliki.
The future is, I am very optimistic for the future. As Said said, the restructuring, the new blood in the government, we have high hopes on them, and we will see a lot, inshallah, in future.
Sure, great. Absolutely fascinating discussion we have had, and I would like to call upon Mr. Atulya Sharma to do a kind of a summation. At least there are some takeaways that we can leave with.
Yes, thank you, Mayank, and thank you all the panelists for such an enlightening discussion. I can't possibly do justice to all that was discussed and all the insights that were thrown up, but I'll try and briefly sort of, give my key takeaways. We do intend to publish a white paper after this webinar, and some of the recommendations possibly would be tabled in front of the policymakers for them to make the best sense out of it. But let me just attempt to sort of sum up some of the key points that I sort of got from all the panelists today. I think the meeting started off, or the webinar started off on a very positive note, and Engineer Said talked about how the pandemic sort of forced the Omani manufacturing community to innovate, and marine lines were sort of looked at because the land borders were disrupted and closed down. So that's amazing, and I think there is a learning in it. So we did find opportunity in a sort of a challenging situation. I think Same also had talked about the problems that manufacturing was facing in terms of imports of raw materials, or being able to export out their goods to the countries that they export to. Yet they were able to sort of manage those things with some intervention from the government authorities. And the thing that she talked about the cleaning companies, if they were not available, how they sort of doubled up and created some, of their own internal people doubling up and managing the cleanliness and the upkeep of the plants. That is really remarkable, and this is what challenges do. They make us shine as human beings and really come up with innovative solutions. Madaya, I think it's really heartening to note that you took HSC as your primary sort of motive and objective, and you really doubled up, and you talked about the emergency room that you set up, providing 24/7 support to all the tenants. That is remarkable. And what is heartening to note again is the fact that no cases of bankruptcy have been recorded. And I think from all the panelists, what we are given to understand is that business, though slowly, but is coming back on track. And with all the learnings that we have acquired over this pandemic, I think we are in a very good shape to sort of, build on what platform we've been able to build in a very difficult time. Things are only going to get better from here. So if we were able to survive and manage in those difficult times, hopefully things would only look up from here. So I'm very positive on that front. Yes, there are challenges. I think Engineer Said and Mr. Nasir talked about the fact that there are challenges in terms of ICV and the Omani products being used on any sort of tender, especially for the government, so that some preferential treatment is given to the Omani manufacturers. That definitely ought to be done. And the government definitely has to find ways of supporting the local manufacturers, who otherwise, as Engineer Syed also said, are contributing a great deal to the local economy, may it be through taxes or may it be through direct employment, and keeping the wheels of the economy going. So definitely, the government needs to, be considering that. And I think, again, everybody sort of said that with the new restructured government and the new panel of ministers coming in, there is a lot of buoyancy and there's a lot of excitement. Let's not also forget that Oman now is subscribing to the manufacturing of well-being, manufacturing for well-being for 2040. And we are going to be adopting a lot of new technologies and new communication tools to make sure that Oman is at par with, like the UNIDO reports, the United Nations Industrial Development Organization says that Oman should, by 2040, be in a position that today Ireland and Singapore are in, where we can really be at the cutting edge of technology and be able to get all the new IR4, as anybody sort of refers to it in loose terms. All those technologies should be in place so that Oman can really have a very buoyant future as far as the industrial and the manufacturing sectors are concerned. So, yeah, I will give you a detailed take, but I think we're already getting late, Mike. So, Mike? I think we have lost Mike. I think I leave him speechless. Every time I speak, he goes speechless. So, yeah, I think I would like to thank everybody who possibly sort of could join in. Again, thank you very much for, the public sector.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Nasser. Thank you, Mr. Engineer Syed Al-Rashdi. Thank you, Mr. Agnello. Thank you so much for joining in. Thank you, Sama. It was wonderful to hear your insights and views. And a big thanks to all our endorsing partners, Madaya, Oman Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and the Oman Manufacturers Association. I would also like to express my gratitude to our strategic sponsors, which are Octal, Sohar Aluminium, Jotun Paints, Misco, Arij Vegetable Oils and Derivatives, and Al Madina Logistics for their support. And finally, our heartfelt thanks to all our viewers for watching today's webinar. We will be uploading this webinar on YouTube so that you can take a closer look. And we shall be sort of circulating a white paper, as I said, for having some action points and see how we can take things forward as an outcome of this webinar. Thank you so much and have a pleasant day, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.